being born to immigrant parents, that often was the last thing on their mind. I think their main goal was trying to figure out how to make sure that there was a roof over our heads. Wondering if we were being parented well was often not a priority. A lot of other parenting modalities, it's very child-focused, whereas conscious parenting is self-focused, it's parent-focused.
We're trying to become more aware of requests for connection points.
What does it mean for my child to have agency? But also, what does it mean for myself to have agency? What does that look like?
Seema, so one of the things I realized when we had our kid in 2015, Jayan, is that after like about 48 hours, they let you take the kid home without an instruction manual.
Right? How scary is that?
I know, totally scary. And I remember the first night when Jayan was born and, Anjana had a C-section, we were all sleeping and a nurse just comes bursting through the door. She runs in and she goes, "He's choking." And she does something, and I have no idea what she did. And then she walked out, and I was like, wait. What did you hear or see, or what light was blinking that made you think he was choking? Because I need to be able to recognize that again. And she's like, don't worry about it. And so I was like, wait a second. I don't know what caused you to freak out like that, and I'm not going to be able to repeat that. So where's the instruction manual? And they said no instruction manual. What about you, Seema? Did you get an instruction manual with your two kids?
I definitely did not get an instruction manual. And importantly, I realized that I had the incorrect instruction manual for myself too. So that's a load of fun, right?
Yeah.
When you discover that nobody has any instruction manuals that make any sense.
There are none. Well, that's why I'm so excited. I am genuinely excited to welcome Mansi Parikh to our show. And Mansi is a conscious parenting coach, an expert, trained in the principles of Dr. Shefali, right? And Dr. Shefali wrote the book, The Conscious Parent. And so, everyone, let's welcome Mansi to the show. I'm super excited to learn from her, and I think we're going to have a really, really great episode.
Thank you guys for having me. I can't wait to know what we uncover, but parenting is probably one of the most popular subjects right now, so I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah. Well, I think especially for people when you're navigating two different cultures and then you're in the sandwich generation of your parents, having one way, they're likely immigrants, that's kind of who our listeners are. There's a whole other layer to parenting that comes with, more than just figuring out whether or not your kid is choking or when to toilet train or how to sleep train them or whether you put them in public school or private school or how do you handle lying, all of these things. They're just woven in. So I'm so excited that you're bringing not only the parenting piece in with, compassion is something that you really talk about, but also from this lens of being a fellow South Asian that's also ambitious, also very, very, got a very full life and 3 kids of your own. So you really bring a lot of real life experience to the show today. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited. And yes, to your point, none of us got an instruction manual. In fact, I think the specialists who, groom our dogs at the stores have actually more training than we do as parents as to how to even take home small human beings and care for them in these bigger, more emotional ways that are not addressed. And to your point about being born to immigrant parents, that often was the last thing on their mind. I think their main goal was trying to figure out how to make sure that there was a roof over our heads, that wondering if we were being parented well was often not a priority.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like that's the whole episode right there. Mic drop. That the dog groomer has more training than we did when we brought our kids home. I'm probably going to need a whole month to digest that because, but okay, before we get into a lot of parenting stuff, and I want to, get into a lot of it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us your origin story, where you came from, what your experience and training is, what do you do for a career, and then how you got into the conscious parenting world and what led you to where you are today.
Oh, well, I love this because it takes me down memory lane a little bit. But yes, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I was a Jersey girl through and through, and I loved my life just growing up in that kind of environment. Had lots and lots of family and friends. I got my degree from Rutgers, and I remember being in college and really fighting for the opportunity to want to pursue teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher, or I wanted to go into psychology. Those are two things that were just very close to home with me. But being, an immigrant family's daughter and a good Indian girl, my options were based on what my parents had recommended. And while they had great intentions for me, I think I was really pushed to look into something business related. And I think I went down the route of marketing, which was more of one of the more softer, I think, aspects of a business and, degree that I could have pursued. And with that, I went into communications and psychology. So I did a lot of PR work. I did, online marketing. I worked for a fashion company in New York. I worked for the Cause campaign. I tried to figure out how I could stay close to home as far as being more in this like educational and more like softer, more vulnerable space as much as I could. And soon enough got married at a young age of 23, moved out to California and went ahead and I worked for hospitals and I did, my corporate job. And while I loved it, it was not something that I wanted to wake up in the morning to do. And having this kind of rotation go again and again and again, I had the beautiful opportunity of having two babies at once who shook up my entire world. I think all moms can say that having any number of children kind of turns your world upside down. And that's exactly what happened for me. I think given that I had the two at once, I feel like it shook me to my core extra because I just didn't have I didn't have enough bandwidth. I didn't have enough arms to figure out how I was going to embrace this experience. And so I was messing up a lot. I have a beautiful husband who I'm glad to call their father, but wasn't available to be a part of our parenting experience. He was off with doing his training for the job that he does now, which consumed about 80 hours per week on average and didn't come home for days at a time. And so it was me and motherhood staring at me in the face. And it was up to me to figure out how I was going to make this experience look. And being a little girl who grew up playing with dolls and little children and pets and animals and whatever she can get her arms on, I for sure thought that I would have this parenting thing down pat. And I was surprised to find that I have no idea what it is that I'm doing. And more importantly, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't make it feel the way that it used to feel when I was playing mom.
You hit it on the head there. For me, anyway.
And so from there, I just couldn't see myself going back to corporate, though I probably, could have benefited from some of that extra income. And after having my third daughter, or my third child, I just was on, I don't know what she did, but birthing her birthed a whole new version of me and one that like I wasn't ready for, but was kind of something driving me outside of myself, if you will. And I've never been a reader in my entire life. You couldn't get me. You couldn't pay me enough money to read. And I need to stop myself from reading now. And it's usually heavy books. I'm constantly looking to learn. And I feel like I have this entire world in front of me of resources to learn and understand myself better and my worlds better. And so from there started my own conscious parenting journey. And I kept trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And I think we don't realize sometimes that we're always looking for the universe to tell us what we want to do, but the universe is also looking for us. It's a vibrational match. And so it's just as much as I was looking for it, it was looking for me. And so just very gracefully found my way to conscious parenting and went ahead and got my certification, and I just haven't looked back. And I have to say, I'm really excited that I get to wake up every morning to do this job. I could be tired as heck, but being tired but also excited about what you're doing, I think is a really great sign that that is your passion and purpose.
Yeah, living that dharma, which is so beautiful. Why conscious parenting? I mean, because there's so many coach certifications out there. Dinesh has done one that's totally different than mine. There's a lot of, I think, crossover between various coaching certifications, but what brought you to conscious parenting?
Well, I feel like the word in itself, there's nothing like the word conscious in there. And we don't realize how much of us kind of like skim through the world unconsciously if we don't make ourselves aware. And that is that awareness that I am. And what is my contribution here? And so what I loved about my training and what I love about what resonates with me deeply was a beautiful blend of not just Western psychology, but Eastern philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much beauty and knowledge and philosophy behind what what used to be there from ages ago
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of have been like under some dirt that
Mm-hmm.
needed to kind of be cleaned out and brought back to the surface.
Yeah.
And so I love being able to blend those things and talk to my clients that way. But the word consciousness, it just feels so it feels so intentional, because when you are pursuing adopting conscious parenting, that means that you have to be so aware of yourself as the parent.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of other parenting modalities, it's very child focused, whereas conscious parenting is self focused, it's parent focused. When you're able to really focus on yourself as a parent and draw attention to how you're showing up, you actually have complete control over your experience. And I think we often find it really upsetting when we want to set, we want to have a punishment, or we want to tell our children to do something and they're not listening. We want to control them. And yet somehow we never reap the benefits of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what about really diving into ourselves, that why am I showing up the way that I am with my children? What about this really makes me triggered? Why do I feel this way? How did I come here? And when we can deep dive in here, the gifts just beneath that surface shifts the entire family dynamic. And I always warn my clients that if you're ready to start this process, beware, because your relationship with your children will change. And I don't need your children for that to happen. I just need you. In fact, so many moms especially come to me and say, well, what about my husband? Can I make sure my husband shows? I'm like, I don't need your husband.
Mm-hmm.
I just need one parent. And when that one parent shows up in a different energy, it's just the law of nature that the people around will automatically change to kind of fit that difference in vibration that is happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What drives someone, or what brings someone to the realization that they should work with someone like you?
If I'm being quite honest, I think a lot of times it takes hitting rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're really honest with ourselves, when life is really happy and content and everything is going just swimmingly, we're kind of busy taking in the happiness that we don't really take a moment to introspect on our life or take in lessons, because we're just enjoying the goodness. But when we're really struggling, when we're in a place where we don't really know how to move forward from here and we feel like a sense of stuckness, that's when people are like, well, I think I've exhausted all the options that I'm aware of. So now how can I outsource this and get some help? And there are people who come before then. And especially when I'm doing my in-person workshops, like people are able to hear something that really, they're able to hold on to and say, well, I want to learn more now. But, and that's nothing to even be shamed about, because that's just the way our human mind works, is that we oftentimes wait till life feels like it's kind of crashing down on us to kind of reach a hand out.
Yeah. No, it's so true. There's, what is it? Change theory, where the pain of the solution has to become less than the pain of the problem before you will opt to make a shift or explore looking at what, this, to recognize this isn't working. So I'm going to have to find something else. It can be an uncomfortable thing, especially I think when the books aren't working anymore and the podcasts aren't working anymore. And, to have to seek help, especially I think for South Asians, that's really tough. What's been your experience as it relates to people just having that difficulty admitting that they need some support?
Yeah, we all have an ego. Our ego kind of gives a sense of identity. We wake up in the morning and we kind of, without knowingly, we address that I'm here, I exist. And we all need an ego to exist and to survive. So it's not a bad thing. But when the ego kind of serves as a defense mechanism and kind of wearing a mask, of all the egos, the parental ego is the strongest.
Preach, sister. My goodness.
So yeah, it definitely comes with that, but I'm definitely well versed in not necessarily just identifying that ego, but working around it. Because again, I mean, my business, I refer to it as coaching and compassion. And so going in with compassion, it's almost rather than chipping away at a hard ice block to shape it, it's kind of just pouring some warm water to allow it to melt and see what kind of shape comes from it.
Mm,
And I think that's what I like to think of compassion as, that it's like a very light softening. And
mhm,
it comes with such tenderness and love and acceptance. And so with the ego, same thing. The ego is already hard as it is. The
mhm,
ego comes with a hardness, a very stiffness, a rigidness, if you will, because the ego was there to protect us.
yeah.
But as adults, we oftentimes are, again, that comes to the consciousness piece, that how can we separate ourselves from not being that 4-year-old little girl anymore, or that 10-year-old boy anymore who needed to protect ourselves by learning to procrastinate, or learning to, be defensive, or learning to fight, or whatever our ego masks are, being the good girl, being the rebel. These are all masks of the ego. But when we can move away from that and identify that we're no longer in that place, and now here in my adult life, I'm struggling with this one issue.
Mhm,
And now that I'm struggling, how can I move through this with some help?
mhm,
And again, it's just kind of the approach, and kind of being very attuned with the client, and that what angle do they need me to come in from?
mhm,
How soft do I need to approach this? How much is there room for a challenge? And kind of attuning to them, and recognizing and that it's okay to feel safe and to kind of soften. And that does take time. I always ask my clients their age. I'm like, how old are you? And they'll say, I'm 34, I'm 37, or I'm 45, or I've had elder parents who have adult children, and I'm 65.
mm,
And I'll say, okay, well, we've been, this way for this many years.
mhm,
Is it possible that we may not be able to soften who that is, or understand who's underneath that within just a few sessions?
mhm.
And that it might take just a little bit of time for us to really get underneath all that. And so I guess that's a really good thing that I like to keep in mind. And I like to remind them that we're getting towards your goal, but
Mhm.
it takes a second for us to kind of get there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What is the parenting ego, as you mentioned that? Maybe help us unpack that a little bit, how it shows up. How can we be aware of it? Like, let's say I'm listening to this podcast. Like, I don't have an ego parenting, right? How can I become aware of it and start to become attuned as to where it might be impacting or affecting me?
All right. Okay. I'm going to use myself as an example here, because it's
Yeah.
easy for me to pick on myself. But for example, something that is very triggering for me in my early parenting days that I couldn't figure out why was messes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I used to watch like bounty commercials where a child would spill something, and the woman or the man would just kind of sweep it up. I'm like, why can't I just like freaking sweep it up? Like, why am I so irritated?
Yeah.
Why do I feel like I'm falling apart? And that the ego is there to protect me, right? So the trigger was the mess.
Hmm.
Messes trigger me. The trigger of the mess actually never belonged to me. It belonged to my family members. It belonged to my mom.
Mm,
That was very triggering for her. And so what my ego learned to do as a small girl was to
mhm,
clean up whatever was around her, make sure that nothing was a mess. And if it was, then I don't know what my future would have been. I don't know if I would have been in trouble, or whatever the case may be. And so making sure that my ego protected me by preempting the thing that could happen.
mhm,
So it said, well, everything has to be clean. So now my ego identifies myself as somebody that has to be clean, who has to be tidy. My house has to be, just perfect. My kids can't be a mess. They can't make a mess. And so I create this hardening out of
mhm,
safety. But what that looks like in real time with our children is that when my child does make a mess and they're simply trying to explore themselves, it becomes really difficult for me to allow that to happen, because I've gotten in that way.
mhm,
And the
Hmm.
way to approach that is, oh my gosh, again, that word compassion. There is a reason that we are the way that we are.
Hmm.
And there is so much room, and it's so necessary for us to really take a moment to have compassion for why we are the way that we are,
mhm,
because we didn't create it all by ourselves.
mhm,
There's a lot of times that we create things and dynamics and like ego masks because we have to, not because we wanted to.
Hmm.
mhm,
And so having the utmost compassion that I get it that this is really triggering for you right now. I
mhm,
get it. Why wouldn't you be? Holding that space for myself kind of bringing myself to groundedness and to calm and to then approach my child. But what ends up happening is that ego kind of keeps me from connecting with my child.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps me from allowing my child to have their childhood experience.
Mhm.
I have to say, I very happily have worked through that and do still hold compassion for myself. But if only you can see the other side of my room, guys, I've come a long way.
Is it messy?
It is a huge mess.
Well, it looked great from here.
But the fact that I can look at it and feel safe and feel okay is a huge deal. And that means that if I can allow myself to be imperfect,
Yeah.
then I can allow my kids to be imperfect. And therefore, that ego hasn't gotten in that way. But for somebody to tell me that, oh, you're so clean, you have to be so, tidy and perfect, that doesn't make us feel good.
Yeah.
So when somebody kind of criticizes our parenting or has something to say about it or where there can be improvement, imagine the catastrophic feeling that parents feel because our parenting is a reflection of our deepest self. And so that's where that ego kind of keep our parents stuck. And it's okay because everyone will come to that at their own time.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much your story was really enlightening. Thank you for sharing that. But it made me think of a question. On average, I don't know if you can quantify it, but I'm really curious to hear your answer. How much of our parenting is some form of a projection of our childhood?
I love your question, Dinesh. In fact, I'm so curious to go in deep with you because it takes I can always gauge how somebody comes in, and I have to say you have quite some intuitiveness to even to ask that in that way. But
Thank you.
100%, 100%, I would say 100%, if I'm being quite honest.
Yeah.
It's a culmination of our conditioning that we received in our childhood and how we were raised, but also from culture and society and religion and everything that we're surrounded by. But for example, how do the two of you know to peel a banana before eating it?
I mean, the child watches the parents around, right? And so
Yeah,
I
like we
must
know,
have watched my mom peel a banana.
Mhm.
and that's how childhood is. So if we see that when hardship comes, that people don't talk about it, then we also grow up to avoid conflict.
Mhm.
When we grow up to see when we do something wrong that we're going to be shamed, then that's what we know to be true.
Mhm.
And I love reminding parents that from 0 to 7, our kids are operating in a brainwave called theta. So not only are they taking in the words that we're saying and the things that we're doing, but they're taking in our energy. So it's like walking into, for those of us who unfortunately ever have had to or do or will walk into funeral homes, the energy that we feel, nobody's sitting there communicating to us that this is a very sad and somber, or oftentimes, depending on our outlook on death, a joyful and contentful place. We kind of can just read the room. We can feel the energy.
Yeah.
And that might look different than us walking into a celebration of a marriage or, a birthday party and the excitement that comes with that. And so our kids are constantly walking into rooms and they're scoping out the energy. It's like their feelers are always out and they're like, what's the mood? What's going on? What are people feeling? Because they are just that deep.
Yeah.
They are not superficial. They read the room completely.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids are so intuitive. And I think from what I've seen, it's they're actually closer to their realized selves at that age. Like we all are. We're the very essence of happiness and joy. And then it's these layers that happen, right? We take in whatever messages and then we have them twisted or whatever. It's like a layer of dirt, right? And then another layer of dirt and then another layer of dirt. That can then lead us to feel all sorts of things and act all sorts of ways that aren't really aligned with who we really are.
To your question too, Dinesh, and Seema, you beautifully put it, and just reiterating on that, it's an unlearning. So with the projections that came from our childhood and us adopting that now as parents, it's not that we need to learn something new. I'm actually working with parents to unlearn.
To unlearn. Yeah.
And the way that I love, the analogy I love giving is, and you guys are South Asian, so I feel like you'll appreciate this. But do you guys remember back in the day when we would go to India and we would have these like handheld bags and they would be really heavy?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be holding a bunch of them and there would be somebody to help. But we've got all these bags that we're holding. They're on our head. They're, on our shoulders, or we were carrying and pushing them until we look down to look at the baggage tag. And you're like, wait, that doesn't have my name on it. This bag doesn't have the sari that I tied on the corner of it. That's not my bag.
Yeah.
This is not my luggage. This is not my baggage. Yeah. And it's recognizing that, well, that bag has my mom's name on it. Wait, that one belongs to her.
Yeah.
It's really heavy. I've been wearing it. I've been holding it this entire time. Mom, here, you got to take your bag back. It's not serving me anymore. Mm-hmm. Or, grandfather or society, no, I don't need this patriarchal bag. Take it back. It doesn't serve me anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of shedding yourself of these conditionings and these layers that have been put on us so that we can get closer to our authentic self. And as we do that, we're able to freely allow our kids to be their authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to get us killed? Because I think if I gave a suitcase back to my mom to carry, I would get a slipper thrown at me. Like you should carry your bags. What are we feeding you for?
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%.
That's a really good analogy. And I on a recent trip, I did take home someone else's bag by accident, and I opened it and I was like, wait, these aren't my clothes. And I had to take it back to the airport. So that's a really good analogy. So good. I have some actual pointed parenting questions. Can I ask you those?
Yes, please. Go for it.
Help us, and I think this will be applicable to a lot of our listeners because our listeners have roughly, we're of the same age demographic as Seema and I, right? We have kids that are younger. Help us, and this is a very complex question, understand the line between solving a problem for our child, helping them through it, and doing nothing, right? And I'll give you a real example. There's a situation at my son's school right now that makes him uncomfortable. But I know that, and not to the point where it's something that needs to be actioned on, right? But I know if I address it, that in itself will make him uncomfortable, and I'll be sort of clipping his wings from being able to deal with it, right? And so how does a parent navigate that? Because I believe as kids get older, the problems become more complex, right? Like in the beginning, it's going to the bathroom, pretty simple. As they get older, the problems get complex. And, Sanvi, our daughter, she's almost 3. She walked into our room today and said, Daddy, look at my hair. Isn't it so pretty? And I was sort of stuck, tongue-tied about well, I don't want to say, no, it's not pretty, right? I have to say, yes, it is pretty, but I don't want to leave it there because I don't want her to develop a sense of self-worth based on her looks, right? So I kind of said, yeah, your hair is pretty and you've got a beautiful smile and you're really smart and you're really happy. And you know what I love most is that you're brave and courageous, right? So I kind of tried to give her the full ingredient list of things that I believe. But going back to, this line of where to help versus not help versus nudge or suggest, or wherein just come in with an iron fist and fix the problem. Because, when we grew up, I think a lot of our parents were of the, I'll just do it for you. I'll just fix it because we have to move on to the more important pressing things of life, which is providing a lifestyle in a new country where we don't even know the language and we're fighting to get our visa and things like that. It's a long question, isn't it? Seema, I have to learn how to ask shorter questions.
Well, I heard 2 questions.
Yeah.
So let's get to your daughter, Sanvi, first.
I stuck one in. You saw that, right? I had 2 questions, but I wanted to ask one, and I got 2 in.
Yes. Well, I love, first of all, for a little girl to be seen by her mom is one thing. And for a little girl to be seen by her dad is like just a whole nother level. And when she came to you and she said, and you said hair, right? Daddy, look at my hair. It's so pretty.
Yeah.
You had the answer right there. So I think as parents, we have these like really amazing functional brains and we always think we need to come up with something clever. what if you just had to mirror back to her exactly what she said?
Mm.
So an alternative could look like, wow, Sanvi, you're right. Your hair is really beautiful. What do you like about it?
Mm.
And she might say, I like the bow that I picked out. And we're like, ooh, let's see what's on the bow. You oftentimes, again, parenting is so energetic if we allow it to be. You energetically engaging in her experience is validating everything that she's looking for.
Mm.
And so when our kids come to us, and I know you guys have younger kids, or even older kids if they're doing like a school project or they're coloring on something, it's almost like we want to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. You should be the next artist. And, I'm going to post this on social and whatever else comes after that. But what if they come to you with a drawing and they say, Mommy, look at what I made. And you said, oh my goodness, you made that? Can you tell me what your favorite part about that is? I love the water that I drew, the ocean waves. Oh my goodness, I love that. And look at that blue and the way you mixed it with the green. Validation can come from just mirroring off of them,
Mm-hmm.
but also reminding them of their worth and reminding them of their characteristics. But when we are very present in their day-to-day situations, that in itself is the validation.
Mm.
And we don't want to not validate our kids because validation is something that we should not rely 100%, but I'd like to say 90% of validation should come from us as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else who validates us is just a bonus.
Yeah.
But for our kids, it is important for us to validate them because they only learn to validate when they've been validated.
Yeah.
But yes, there is a fine line between overly kind of showering our kids and in an obscure and just kind of saying anything to them versus very poignantly, mirroring back to them their own experience. And so I love daddy daughter, duos and just the way that parents can really make that child feel so seen and safe, but based on their experience.
Hmm.
And then as far as the situation with how do we know where to draw the line to actually help our children, how to guide them, how to take a step back? And you said that so well. Culturally, our parents wanted to fix things, and I think that might be the case in almost every culture. But I will say this: the fix it is also a mask of the ego.
Yeah.
Us wanting to fix something is a way of calming our anxiety and seeking a sense of control because then we are safe if we fix it.
Yeah, it
And
gets
that's
rid
a
of the
real
uncertainty, right? It gets rid of the uncertainty.
100%.
Yeah.
And so to that point, we want to do this to kind of, stop anything that will come after that. So is there a time and place where we need to get involved with the situation? Oh my God, yeah. If there are words coming out of our kids' mouths that are concerning, that, make us feel worried about their safety or their well-being, that is do not wait for permission. Parents need to go straight to the source and kind of deal with the situation.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's one of those like in between things where there's no danger or harm in place, but it's just something that needs to be worked through. And I think that that's where we really attune to our child and we listen and we have open dialogue where they can share multiple levels of their experience and we listen and we ask a lot of questions. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but the best form of listening, the best form of communicating is listening. And so us really being a really great listener, an active listener with our children that, well, how did that make you feel when that happened? Or how did you approach it?
Yeah.
How did you find that, helped you in your situation? And that might change from day to day. So when we check in with our kids, check in with them a few times with whatever situation they're working through. But at first, give them the space to try to see if they can work it out.
Yeah.
There is a 50% chance or probably even 70% chance that they won't get it right. But here's where I think the importance lies is that we don't want them to get it right. We actually don't want them to get it right.
Yeah.
We don't want them to show up perfect because we want them to make mistakes. And I say this so much, especially to our older children, is that we want our kids to make as many mistakes as possible under our guidance.
Yeah.
Because when they make a mistake and we're able to guide them and kind of the way we talk to them, what are the words that are coming out of our mouth? Are we coming in with a shaming attitude and saying, well, you shouldn't have done that and you should have known better. I can't believe that, you did this. Or are we saying things like, wow, that seems really hard and I'm surprised that you approached it this way. Let's talk about that. How did that, how did you feel like you showed up? Or what would you have wanted to say instead? Or, how can I help you? Do you need ideas on what you can say or do? Then when they grow up and they make mistakes and they make a mistake at their workplace, they make a mistake in a relationship, they're going to have their parents' voice in their head. They're going to have us in their head. And the way we spoke to them is going to be how they speak to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
setting their inner dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mansi, this is all, it requires, from what I understand, a much subtler, slower response. Because to your point, the words that you shouldn't have, or like it's a very black and white way of thinking. And what you're saying, what you're offering is a multitude of different ways to approach it with just a little softer edge, and with a lot of compassion instead. And it's a learned skill, right? From everything that I've experienced, at least. Something that came up for me as I was learning to do this for myself, and because it changes, right? You figure it out for your kids at a certain age, and then they come into another phase, and then you're left these same tools are there, but now you're dealing with them in a completely different way. It can be very frustrating as parents to have to unlearn this. And so, what are you saying to parents that are like, that would just take too much time to sit there and, watch them struggle with learning how to tie their shoe, or sitting to finish their meal, or remembering to do their homework and then constantly forgetting it. What would you say to these parents this conversation might really be bringing up some uneasiness, because we're so used to this, like, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. What are your words of
Yeah.
advice?
Well, even just when you said that, I think what came to my mind was this deep-seated hustle culture that we live in. And hustle culture, I mean, like physically and what we accomplish in our day. I mean, I don't know what the statistic is, but the amount that we accomplish in one day is how much a human was able to accomplish in like a week or a month. And so we're almost overextending ourselves. And I feel like, again, this goes to societal pressure and cultural pressure that we have to accomplish something in order to be something. And I always like to remind parents that we are a human being, not a human doing. And so, you know what? It does feel scary. And you're right, Seema. And this is something that I think probably was like the longest for me to learn. If I'm being quite honest, I have to remind myself from time to time. I'm at a phase in my parenting where I'm not bending down as much. I'm not changing diapers. I'm not wiping. Like, I'm not doing these more physical activity jobs. I'm not running after kids. My kids go to work, and I work as a coach, and I decide my own hours, and I have self-care days. But when I have those days where I can be slow, I sometimes struggle to remind myself that I don't need to be doing something in order to be someone. And that me just being here in this moment is enough. And so you're right. I'm sure that parents are going to be like, well, I don't know how comfortable I feel with this slowing down, but in the slow is where we grow. And so even something simple as tying shoes or eating a meal, that has absolutely nothing to do with our child.
Yeah.
And though they might be difficult to hear, that's why I want to have compassion for those parents who are sitting with a load and weight of anxiety, that the shoes need to be tied. We have to get here on time. And this might be really taboo. In fact, it's taboo with my husband. So I know it's going to be taboo with a lot of people. But I was like, babe, what is the rush for you to get everywhere on time? Like, yes, we want to honor on time. We want to respect. That is a way of showing respect. But we are also in a phase of our life where if our focus is on the outside world and how it operates, and we're not able to create space to move and maneuver through the nuances of the little ones that we're caring after, we're going to miss it. We're not going to be like this all the time. We're not going to be packing 100 snacks for just the day trip. We're not going to be, packing this and, getting the diapers in the back. We're not going to be doing all these things.
Yeah.
And we're going to seamlessly be able to get out the door. But what about creating space and allowing there to be room for your child to tie their shoelace? And maybe if it's too much, being creative. I think we forget as parents that we got to tap into that creativity, something that we can learn from our kids because they have it really full-fledged right now. But if it's too much to tie their shoes in the morning, get a freaking Velcro shoe and then give them a shoe to tie at home and just sit in the family room and practice. It doesn't have to be just one set way.
Right.
If meals are difficult, how can we be creative? If they don't like eating smushy oatmeal, what if we turned it into an oatmeal bake?
Yeah.
What if we offered them something different and they had a heavier lunch?
Yeah.
What if we allowed there to be some space?
Mm.
Yeah. The resourcefulness. I mean, I think that is key in navigating a lot of those problems. One thing that we are trying to do a little bit more in our family is, and I think this goes to the byproduct is slowing down, but we approach it in a different way, is that we're trying to become more aware of requests for connection points, right? And if like, what do I mean by a connection point? Um, like my son will come in and say, "Hey, Dad, we caught a touchdown," or something like that. Like rather than blowing past that comment as a collection of words to transfer information, which is he just wants to tell me he caught a touchdown, right? Slowing down and recognizing that is a request or a plea for a connection point, and receiving that request for a connection point, and then reaching sort of back out and connecting with him. And I think not only with kids, but between spouses and partners and parents and other people, there are so many requests for connection points that we blow past, right? um, I'll give you an example. Seema texted me a picture today, maybe a couple hours ago, of her Manish and Seema with a bunch of holy colors, right? And I remember specifically thinking, because I was doing something, I looked at the picture and I looked at it and I closed it down, but then I opened it back up and gave a heart to it because in my mind, I was like, oh, this is a request for a connection point, right? I need to reach back out. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but to me, that really slows things down in my mind.
Maybe you needed to slow down and the universe was just like whispering to me to send you. I don't even know why I sent it to you, but I was like, this
Yeah.
is fun. I'm going to send this to him.
Was it? I don't know. Was it not a connection point? A
I mean,
request?
I clearly, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think what you bring up is so important here because oftentimes our requests for connection points are subtle, so subtle that we ourselves don't even know that we're making them. Right. And so, like, me sending you the picture, I don't remember what it was that I was thinking other than like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And it's such a cute picture. And you and I have a relationship. And so I sent it to you. And maybe I was thinking like, oh, it could be any number of things, right? But there was some sort of subconscious need that caused me then to reach out to you and share a picture.
Yeah. The only thing I
Um,
need to hear now is that you sent it to 50 different people. And no, I'm kidding.
but I mean, I think it's important to, when our kids are upset, like I have a middle schooler and almost every day there's this huge wave of emotion and it doesn't feel good all the time. It certainly doesn't feel good for him. It doesn't feel good for us. um and I think just keeping in mind that is a point of connection. He's sharing that there's something that's lacking, right? Perceived lacking, that he needs to like, so it's just, of course it's right in the middle of everything, right? You're trying to get somewhere, you're trying to focus on dinner, you're trying to just figure something out, and there's this connection request, and it's up to us to figure out what is it that the other person needs and how can I best give that to them in a way that feels authentic, that feels easy for me, and is actually going to be beneficial without running me ragged, and actually, all of those things. One of the questions that I learned from one of my friends that has grown kids now is, when her kids are relaying something to her, as coaches, we're inclined to just kind of jump in and be like, okay, well, how do you feel about that? And like, da 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 da. Her suggestion was to simply acknowledge it and say, what can I say to you that will actually be helpful?
Hmm.
Because there's this tendency to assume like, oh, you want my help with it, or you need me to fix it. That, going back, Mansi, to what you were saying about the ego, there's just so many different things that we might be looking for in our connection request, and we are not conscious of what they are until we get asked, how can I help you, in a way that you're being asked to be helped.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything that both of you are saying. And I mean, even to your question, or the way that you're able to reflect on what you guys are doing in your families as far as not missing those connection points, there's ways that kids will want to connect with us in a positive way. And like you said, Seema, we might overlook it because we're almost like, oh, they're in a good mood, so I don't need to pay attention as much. But then there's also at times that they're not feeling good, and we almost like feed into this negative energy in a different way. And the thing with kids is that they're constantly showing us how they're feeling through their behavior. And this is speaking to not just our little ones and our toddlers, but our teenagers and our grown adults. When they're showing you, when they're behaving in a certain way, they're showing you how they feel. It's hard for us to swallow. So if our kids are throwing themselves to the floor, which happens often for me from time to time, when they throw themselves on, my kid is showing me how she feels. She's showing me, and I don't always have an answer for her, but it's that she needs to know that I'm here. And I still very clearly remember her coming home from school every day, and she'd throw herself to the floor. And I remember one day just being like, I don't even know what to do with this anymore. And I walked past her, went into the kitchen to drop off their lunch boxes, and was walking back. And I was still pretty annoyed and triggered by this point because I'm like, I haven't done anything. And as parents are really good at personalizing or kind of making everything about us in a way. It's like, well, what if this isn't about you, but you're just having to experience it? And so I walked back, and as I was walking back, I stepped on a Lego piece. And thank God for that Lego piece because it hurt so bad that I had to pause and sit down. And it was when I sat down to really take some deep breaths and be like, I'm in pain and what am I experiencing right now? That I kind of came back into myself, centered myself, and went back to my daughter. But this time I went back to her differently. And instead of being upset and adding to the situation, and like you said, seeking that connection and missing it, I was able to bend down. I picked her up off the floor and I just held her. I had nothing to say to her because there was nothing to be said. There was nothing to be said that my hug wasn't already communicating. And this is if your child is appreciative of physical touch at this point. And so I was holding her within literally seconds, maybe like 30, 60 seconds. She got up and ran off as if nothing had ever happened. And I think we forget to take that into consideration too, that our kids are asking for us, but when they're asking for connection, we think that they're asking the world of us. In true connection, when a child truly feels securely attached to a parent, it doesn't require much time, but establishing that basis and that foundation, that takes some time if done well. And so what happened after that was she ran off. And just like our emotions, they want to flow and peek through our body and flow out. It takes 90 seconds for that to chemically kind of follow through. But when that isn't able to be honored and we stop the feeling at its, and we don't allow it to flow through, or we kind of like suppress it, it lingers in our body and it comes out in another way and another way. And so I feel like that hug was able to it was able to ease right through her and she moved on. But to your point, connection, there's so many different ways, like you said, that kids are asking for connection. And isn't that the point of life?
Yeah. Yeah, we're
think we
social
forgot.
beings. Yeah, we're not in our little boxes. It's unsafe to be cast out of the tribe, biologically, evolutionarily speaking. Yeah.
And so connection is as important as air and water and food, because if those basic needs physically are not met, what does that mean? That we are physically not well. If emotionally our basic needs of feeling heard, feeling valued, being seen are not met, then our mental and emotional well-being is not there. And so how do parents make space to do that? It's easy for us to say it in this moment. And I feel like what I would love to say to parents is that you cannot do this. We cannot carry through with this task if there hasn't been any taking care of ourselves happening. And that goes to self-care. And it sounds so silly, sounds like such a small little thing to do, but truly, the amount in which we are able to love ourselves is the amount in which we can love another. So what would it be like to step away and take some time for yourself? Create that space within you to then be able to offer connection, because we can say it, but if that space isn't available within the parent, they can't actually be able to execute it.
Right. So Mansi, you actually said something here that I can't remember if it was the two of us that were having a private conversation or if it was with somebody else. But what you said here, I think is really important to draw out, which is the self-care piece, right? Because we often think of self-care as I'm going to go grab some beers with the guys, or I'm going to go watch, I'm going to go get my nails done, or I'm going to go on a vacation. Just, we're going to have a little honeymoon 2.0, if you will. But what you said was it stemmed back to compassion. So can you help our listeners really get clear and understand that when you say self-care, what does that mean? And why is that so much more effective at helping you show up as the more conscious parent, the more conscious leader?
Yeah. And I feel like everyone will come in with different ideas as far as what their favorite method of self care is. And let's make it really easy
Mm-hmm.
because getting your nails done can be self love. But here's a caveat: when you're getting your nails done, what is your mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Is it scrolling on your phone? Is it, you know, watching a show? Is it just kind of blanking off into space? What is it that you're doing it? Because if you're using that time to really take in yourself and kind of introspect on your day or your time or that thing that's been gnawing at you, what if that was self-care? Or I know I love to go to acupuncture, and acupuncture in itself or any kind of like physical healing modality is, self-care. But I like to take it a step further, and I actually like to put myself in a meditative state. And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big fan of meditation, but I go ahead and put myself in that meditation state while I'm having the acupuncture done. And I feel like that feels like a deeper layer of self-care. So self-care is taking out time for the self. That doesn't mean, and this might be triggering because I've got clients who actually find it triggering to go and do self-care and be on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost that they want to be with people. And so that also can look like self-care. Self-care can look like you not doing the dishes
Yeah.
and, allowing your spouse to do it and spending time with the kids. But no matter what we do that looks like self-care, it's that, are you aware of yourself? Are you aware of your patterns, how you feel? Are you feeling like your body is changing? And there are times where I used to have a self-care day, which I need to re-implement. But it used to be on Mondays. And sometimes, and I would do something different all the time, but sometimes I would just want to like watch a show or catch up on something that I haven't seen in a while. But
Yeah.
I would always tell myself that, yes, you can watch the show. But before you watch the show, take some time to journal and take some time to be with myself. And I would oftentimes get lost in that. And I wouldn't care to watch, or I would do it and then I would watch.
Yeah.
And so self care is meant to be fun. It's
Yeah.
meant to be consistent if possible, because every time you take care of yourself, you're better able to then take care of your loved ones and your little ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So self-care with the capital S, not self-care like just your body in this temporary time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So powerful.
Mm-hmm. Really good. So I don't know what the word is for the quality. The easy definition is confidence, right? But I don't want to ascribe confidence to this quality. But what are some things parents can do to give their kids the best chance at cultivating this quality, which kind of looks like confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, and it allows someone as an adult to get their own back, to have high levels of emotional regulation, right? To stand up for themselves, to have self-confidence and believe in themselves that within them they can figure things out, and to help minimize the negative self-talk, which sounds like, well, that's not for me. There's no way I can do that. Why would I even try that? I'm, and the number of way that fear shows up. So I don't know what the word is for that quality, but to me, it's almost like a getting of your own self. And I know it exists because I see it in some people, and there are sort of these glimmering, shining objects out in the sea of self-doubt, where you could come across someone, you're like, wow, you actually believe in yourself, right? And what is that quality? Well, how would you describe it? And what are your tips?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I think the word that you're looking for is secure.
Okay. Yeah.
So somebody who is secure in themselves and securely attached.
Yeah.
And that's everything that you're describing. And that encompasses a level of confidence as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how we define confidence, because confidence could mean sticking up for yourself or knowing that it's not worth having to stick up for yourself. And it can go either way.
Yeah.
But being able to carry yourself in such a esteemed way, but also humbleness, it all boils down to security. You being secure in who you are, faults and all. And that all stems from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it goes back to that inner dialogue and that inner critic, that the way that we are parenting our children will translate to their ability to be secure in themselves if we can establish a secure attachment. So that means that when they mess up, that we offer grace and we offer guidance. Now, parenting or conscious parenting is never without guidance or without some kind of form of lesson or learning. It's not like we want our kids to kind of walk all over us and we're just a mat for them to wipe their feet on. No, it's very hands-on. And so when they're having a problem, like you mentioned earlier, how can we offer our child some space to mess up or to work through their situation? And how can we be this small voice in their head that they can choose the amplification in which it takes within their mind?
Yeah.
It means validating them and when they validate themselves. And so when, your daughter said, Eileen, my hair is beautiful. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. Your hair does look beautiful. Something so small as that versus taking it to a bigger scenario of, man, Dad, like, I feel like I handled that situation. Like I could have done this, but I did my best. I'm like, you know what, bud, I do see that you did your best. Acknowledging the parts of security that they do express to you. Because when they do express that and you highlight that, it becomes more amplified within themselves. And so giving them that space to kind of come into their own. And it comes with messing up. Because when they're able to mess up and we're able to be in their ear and it's something positive, then that's a positive translation to what they can take in their adulthood.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing to say is that when you can meet them with a challenging situation with encouragement and confidence in them. How can a child be confident in themselves if their parent isn't confident in them? Mess ups and all.
Yeah. I love that. Tell me if I'm royally screwing up my kids in this approach. I love what you said about security. I think that is the word. It is being secure in yourself as who you are, right?
Yeah.
And one way that I've learned, I've read and observed other parents is to show that you're secure as a parent, as a dad, in the failures and other things, right? So one way we do that with my son is to permit public failures, right? And the fastest and easiest way to expose him to significant levels of failure in public are sports, right? He'll take the shot, he'll miss it. No, you move on with the game, right? It's a failure in public. The other way I've learned and read and observed from other parents is to demonstrate failures that we encounter, right? So starting the podcast, for example, right? He saw that we stepped out of our comfort zone, tried something, and, it is what it is. It didn't turn out well or whatever happens, right? All of that. And modeling that, it is okay to do things and as an adult and allowing my son and daughter to borrow some of that security that we have developed now as adults, right? That we didn't have as kids, and pack that away for a rainy day. Like I saw my dad do something where he messed up, and that was okay. So it should be okay for me too, right? What do you think about that?
100%. I mean, I think you're doing all right, Dinesh, because
Okay.
that's exactly is showing our kids that we are human and human. And I say this to my kids all the time. And I think I've said it everywhere just about, but dogs equal barking, cats equal meowing, humans equal mistakes. I think when we can so closely translate that humans are meant to make mistakes, like that is our language. Like we're not going to function outside of that.
Yeah.
When we can drill that into them, they can see mistakes as nothing different than just breathing air. It's just something that I'm going to do. And when you can normalize that for them and you can say, like, this is just dad being a human, then they can also say, well, dad messed up and he seems real, like, confident. He seems good with himself. Like, of course I'm going to mess up. Like, why wouldn't I mess up? I'm a human. Of course I'm going to mess up. Of course I'm going to eat. I'm a human. Of course I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
And so being able to translate that to them is a beautiful example. And of course, like, having discretion of the age of the child and what we share, of course, that's all to be taken into consideration and factored in. But being able to let our kids know that, you know what, I can see how you're feeling really upset about this moment about when you didn't catch the ball. Kind of reminds me of this time when, I messed up at something at work. And I thought to myself, like, man, I don't know how I'm going to come back from this. And I can't believe I did that. And it was really hard in that moment. And it took me like a day to kind of think about it and sleep on it. But then I woke up the next day and I thought to myself, like, well, if I didn't make that mistake, I wouldn't have learned this.
Mm,
And if I didn't learn this, then I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. And
yeah.
it's kind of like just what I needed. It just felt really difficult.
Mhm.
And I can't take your mistake away, bud. I can't take away the fact that you missed it. But I'm here to sit with you while you feel you're upset, because you should feel upset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I have found just for myself that I can be very verbose when it comes to acknowledging my kids, especially. And so something that I'm working on is just being quiet. And to your point, Mansi, when you talked about just not saying anything and holding your daughter, that oftentimes I believe that we actually, the thoughts and the energies we want to communicate, even though we never communicate them, they actually do get communicated to people, especially those of us that are in close proximity. If you're living with someone, or if you're sleeping in the same bed, or you're
Mhm.
sleeping on the same level of the house, the closer you are, those thoughts get transferred, right? So they will have those insights on their own, whether they're conscious of it or not.
Yeah.
And part of this for me is, at least this is only for me, saying this is not, I don't know if it's true for everybody, but it's just trusting the process of having those insights, having those realizations, and just sending them out towards these kids. Because when they're having these big emotions and triggers, and sometimes they can feel like, you don't get it. Like, that was work. That's you, right? That's the other thing the ego will want to do, is say, well, yeah, but that's okay for you.
Mhm.
But it's not okay for me to make a mistake. But the other thing I wanted to say was that it was, what we're talking about is bringing up the forgiveness ritual. I think it's, I don't know if I'm going to mess up how to say this, but it's the Babemba tribe, um, in the African tribe, that will actually celebrate when someone makes a mistake, or when someone commits an injustice of any sort. They will actually bring that person into the center and celebrate them and make them feel validated and loved. Um, I guess just, for all the reasons we were just sharing about, which I think is so
Wow.
beautiful.
Mhm.
I love that. I love that's being celebrated. I feel like we should adopt that and do that
Right?
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's have a party the next time somebody messes up.
Yes.
Have a
Yeah,
party
we
instead
could.
of not a pity party though.
Well,
Yes.
before we wrap up, I know so you were a conscious parent coach, a compassion coaching and compassion, and um, I think we have a treat for our listeners where we're going to share some of the strategies that you use in your actual coaching practice. Um, and one of the strategies that you mentioned to us is the triple A strategy.
Mhm.
And from hearing you talk about it and learning a little bit about it, I can tell it can be really effective. So why don't you, if you're up for it, give us a peek behind the curtain a little bit and share some of the real tools that parents have used with a lot of success to bring sort of a more wholesome, secure feeling in the family dynamic.
Yeah, honestly, these three words are kind of something what I base some of my sessions on with my own clients, but there's three words that start with the word A. And if you can remember, if just even one of them in that moment, it can really kind of take you out of this reactive mode to be in a more responsive mode to your child. And the three A's are as follows. It's agency, attunement, and authenticity.
Hmm.
So attunement, what does agency mean? Agency is our kids coming to this world with so much energy and curiosity that they want to use their hands and their limbs to really embrace and feel and experience that the world that they're living in that they call home now.
Yeah.
So if you notice a little child at the park, they don't just want to play with the sand in their hands. They want it in their hair, and they want it in their shoes and their
Yeah.
clothes. Like they didn't have.
Yeah.
Yes, my little one used to eat rocks, and it was a hard time in life. But they want to experience it and taste it and touch it and feel it. They want to have agency to know that they can do all of these things. And it makes me think of maybe somebody who had mobility in their life. And given the circumstances of life, or perhaps an autoimmune condition or a disease, lost their mobility. The grief and the frustration that comes from knowing what it used to feel like to be able to see or to move their legs and to no longer be able to do that, it's kind of what our kids kind of come with. It's like they have everything intact. They want to do the things, they want to see and experience the things. But as there's these things, people called parents who keep telling them no. And so I remember having this one client who told me, Mansi, what do I do when I go to pick up my kids from school and I bring their milk bottles with me? They're taking the milk and there's straw out and they're spitting milk out at each other. Like, how is that not okay for me to tell them? Like, yeah, it's okay for you to tell them to stop. But here's what we can do about that. The agency of wanting to be creative and work with the straw is give them a cup of water and give them those straws and tell them to go outside and spit water out at all of the plants.
Yeah.
It's this need in their body that they want to explore, and to let them get that out of their system. Like wanting to tie the shoes is actually a sense of agency. They want to see and feel what that feels like to do it. They
Yeah.
want that. Our teenage daughters or our teenage sons, they want to know what it's like to have agency to pick maybe the wrong guy or the wrong friend, because they have the right and the freedom to do so. And that agency, they get to have it because we're there to hold space for them and to help guide them through that. It's that freedom that goes back to that sense of, having that security and growing up secure. And then there's attunement. Attunement is really just, again, that goes back to that energetic connection and understanding that what is my child feeling right now? When a child falls down, this is like a big, big pet peeve of mine, but when a child falls down and they've scraped their knee, and the parent says, oh, nothing happened, you're okay, you're okay. No, the child is showing you that they're not okay. And when the child looks from their eyes to the parent's eyes and sees that their parents are not having any kind of remnants of what their experience is, that makes them feel entirely confused. They're not able to function and understand correctly now because they're like, wait, why doesn't their face look like mine? Or how come they're not mirroring back to me that I was unsafe or that what happened? Does that mean we rush over to them and we say, oh my God, are you okay? And kind of scoop them up and not even let them have a chance to pick themselves up? No, it's us acknowledging what happened, that, oh my goodness, did you fall down? Did you scrape your knee? Can I come and see it and check it out? Oh, honey, are you okay? It's not overdoing it, certainly not underdoing it and overlooking it. It's meeting them where they're at. So attuning to our children, that are they in a sad place right now? How can I attune to them and know how to read the room with them? And then the last thing is authenticity. Is I think one of the biggest responsibilities as parents is to protect our children, but not in just the physical sense. That's just like basic level. Like we want to make sure our kids are protected. But I mean like in the emotional sense, is that how can we protect the fact that they get to be who it is that they are? And oftentimes parents can be the first people to kind of take that away. And it's knowing and being humble enough that we might do that. And that's okay. To some extent, we will. And they'll be okay from that. But what percentage of that are we taking away from them? Are we expecting them to mold into this person that we want them to be, as opposed to creating space and shaping a world around who they want to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so beautiful to have a framework of some sort. I love how you simplified it into the 3 A's, because I think in the moment for us as parents, especially when it's our first kid and you're just like, I have read all the books and I've watched other people do it. And now this all, it's just really, it feels really hard. It's the equivalent of saying you need to just calm down, or, if I knew how to do that, I would. Right. And so what I love about this is that your framework gives parents a place to start, and a place to figure out for themselves, what does it mean for my child to have agency, but also what does it mean for myself to have agency? What does that look like? I mean, parents, when you're listening to this, I highly encourage you. Dinesh does this every week. He tells you to go journal on the questions that are posed within the show. But I think this is just such a good one, because when we reflect on that, and then we reflect on attunement and what that means, and why that's important, and what might be different if we actually attuned, and all these other questions that start just coming out when we reflect on a single word, we might uncover some baggage that you referred to earlier that we're then able to put down, because now we're conscious of the fact that we're carrying it. Right. So I think, Mansi, you're doing just such a beautiful job of helping people become more conscious of who they are as human beings, and then as leaders of the family, leaders in life, and as parents. I'm so grateful that you shared this framework, because that's just so simple. And I can already see ways that this would help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky to have you come on the show. I've learned so much from you, and I have to say you're the real deal. You're articulate. You've thought about this in a lot of different ways, and you have a specific gift for breaking down or making these concepts easily digestible and actionable. Tell us one thing that we can do if we're parents or with the people in our lives, based on your background and your lived experience and your expertise, that we can implement today, that undoubtedly, beyond a shade of doubt, that will change our life in short order.
Okay. What I would say is to go in with no judgment. So when we're sitting at the family table, dinner table, and our spouse or our partner or whoever is at the table with you, adult wise, says something, try to take in what they're saying just as mere understanding of fact, like, oh, okay, that's what they're sharing. Or if our child says something, when they say, oh, like, oh, I can't believe it was raining so hard. Like, I couldn't even go outside. Instead of taking that in as a judgment of like, wow, why can't that kid just be grateful that it's raining in San Diego? It hardly rains in California. Just taking in the fact that, oh, my child is upset that it's raining. Because I think we oftentimes get stuck in our own mental state of kind of taking information from people and making it into something that it isn't, rather than just taking, and that's what meditation teaches us, is that when we hear a noise, when we feel an ache in our bodies, how can we just allow it to be and not make a story behind it? And so I think that's something we can do, is some better active listening, which is the outcome.
Yeah, really good. That is a good one. Thank you for sharing it.
And you don't have to be a meditator to be a conscious parent, although it does help.
No. Yeah, no, you don't. But absolutely is a really great tool just to add in your toolbox, even if it was once in a while. But no, you don't need to.
Yeah. Well, so we have a special practice on our show, and we call it Ask It Forward. Listeners, if this is your first episode of the Happy and Human podcast, here's how it works. At the end of the show, we have this tradition of asking a question forward. So the last guest has left a question for you, Mansi, and they didn't know who you were. So they just asked a question, and you're going to answer it. And after you answer it, you're going to have a chance then to leave your question for the next guest. Okay. So the last question is from Melissa Shah, who is 1,000-hour Iyengar yoga teacher certified, a yoga therapist. Melissa's question is, what area of your life or of yourself do you want to bring more compassion to, and why? And she did not know that you were on the show, so I think it's really funny that she used the word compassion.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I think I was meant to have this question. I think it would definitely be, my motherhood, but not in my motherhood to my children. I think in my motherhood for myself. I think that I too struggle with an inner critic, that I want to be more compassionate to myself. And I think we forget this, and this is what I teach in conscious parenting. And I often have to keep reminding myself, is that at the end of the day, the child that we're parenting here is our inner child. And being so ever so compassionate to ourselves, that when I do mess up, when I'm unable to show up as my best self, how can I really offer myself true compassion, where I can really allow myself that grace? And when I allow myself that grace, that is the ticket into understanding. That is the ticket into change. And so it's my motherhood for myself more than anything. It's gotten easier for me to mother my children. But when it comes to ourselves, there's still that little hurdle there where I'm noticing that it's a softening that happens over time. Like I said, the warm water over the ice, it's something that happens gradually and gracefully over time. So yeah, it would be my motherhood for myself.
Yeah. So reflecting on how you're showing up in motherhood when things feels hard and sticky for you.
For myself.
Well, one thing I heard someone share about for that very experience is to always keep a picture of yourself at 3 or 4 years old on your desk. And when you hear yourself, saying those things to yourself, even unconsciously, by looking at the picture, you can say, well, would I say that to that child? right?
Mhm.
I
Would I
will.
say that, well, you can't do that? And the obvious answer is no, you wouldn't. No parent would, right?
Yes, and I do
Yeah.
have a picture and
Oh, you do.
100% affected. It is. And you know what? I think with the growth process, depending on where you're at and what you're going through, the turmoil of what that feels like and that transition feels like, it almost feels so intense that you can feel you almost have to channel more compassion than you can ever imagine.
Mhm.
And there are times in life where it doesn't feel that way and it eases. And I think it's recognizing that both are accurate and both are acceptable and both are a part of the growth cycle equally. And it's
Mhm.
just knowing that when it feels harder to access that you're making a transition and that you need it more than ever.
Yeah.
And so, yes, to your point, I love that exercise. In fact, everybody should do that as you're raising your children. Have your child self available for you to look back on, because
Mhm.
that's really who we're parenting.
Mm.
Kids don't
Yeah.
need as much parenting as we need a parenting.
So what's your question for the
My
mystery guest that's to
question.
come?
All right, my question would be, let's see, what is your biggest fear? And I don't mean like I'm scared of heights or I'm scared of a snake, but like, what is your biggest fear in life? And how does that translate to you unleashing your biggest and greatest strength?
Hey, that's a really good one.
That's a great question. Okay, so as we wrap up here, you know, we really appreciate you spending some time with us, and to show our appreciation and to thank you for sharing some time with us. We at the Happy and Human podcast, which is really just Seema and I, and we also have an amazing team, Shannon and our editor. But we'd like to make a contribution on behalf of you in your name to an organization or a cause that is near and dear to your heart for two reasons. One, to show our appreciation to you, and two, to bring awareness to organizations that maybe our listeners or ourselves we don't have awareness of, and the impact that they're making. So in that spirit, is there an organization or a cause or a charity you share with us that we can make a contribution to on your behalf?
Yes, I think it's so honorable that you guys do that. I think it's something hands-on that, you guys are able to take and do right away. And I'm excited to do this with you guys. But a cause that's really important to me, or um, a program or organization, is Girls Inc. I love what they stand for. I love that they acknowledge growth and development and success and setting up girls for the most developed life that they could ask for in every aspect, for women and girls of all color, all backgrounds, all identities. And I think that our girls are going unnoticed. And as our girls go unnoticed, they're growing up to be women who are unnoticed.
Mm.
And there's a lot that women do to contribute to our societies, especially as mothers and as leaders. And that's something that I think being able to identify at such a young age, and going back to all that I like to talk about, is that it all starts in our childhood. And so being able to really flourish this organization that can really help the girls of the future
Mhm.
really flourish to their fullest potential, including and encompassing all things mental health, is something that really is near and dear to my heart. And I wish I knew more about this as I was a little girl and knew that, there's just this out there, and that there is support for girls, and that I hope that as many girls as, can benefit from this do get it.
Mhm.
That's a great cause. We're excited to be able to contribute.
Yeah, and I love
Yes.
your reasoning behind it. I think that resonates with both Seema and I
Mhm.
pretty deeply, and I have been familiar with Girls Inc., so we're really happy to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Well, lastly, Mansi, tell the listeners where they can find you, because we know that there's someone out there who just couldn't get enough of you in just this one podcast. So hopefully we can point them in the right direction.
Yes, no, definitely on my Instagram. That's probably the most involved social platform that I'm on, which is at Coaching and Compassion. And over there, I've got a plethora of information that you can go and kind of take a tip or a trick here and there and use it, in real time with your children, because I think that's what I was looking for, being a young mom and a new mom of twins, is how do I navigate this situation? Like, where's the motivation? Where is it going to come from? And so that's what you can do over there. You can contact me, DM me for any more information, as well as coachingandcompassion.com, where I have my website. You can see all, different things that I'm providing there. That's just a place that you can reach out for if you're looking to want to work one-on-one. And I think that's where the nooks and crannies is
Mhm.
exactly in that, because we get to dive in deep at your pace and kind of really delve in, and I think that's the comfort that parents have. And I always say this, that parents now more than ever are the most overworked, over demanded, and under supported. And so if
Yeah.
society isn't going to offer it to us, go and find yourself support. I'm here to
Mhm.
help in any capacity that I can.